Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? So all I could hear backstage was boom. I didn't know what was going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about new mobility, but we're going to talk about history, where we've been. We're going to talk about where we are and where we're going, all in 14 minutes and 30 seconds. And I got told that if I come in, for every minute I come in under, I get a martini and $50 because we're behind by Karen. So we'll see, although I have a lot of slides. So get ready for a PowerPoint slide roller coaster ride. So before we talk about history, which is very important, we're going to talk about big history. And the fact is that we're here by accident. So what do I mean by that? So the dinosaurs were made extinct by an asteroid 65 million years ago. We've been on the planet for a couple 100,000 years by accident. Basically, if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. And so it's a very fragile ecosystem that we live in. And we're just starting, I think, as Angela was saying earlier, to realize that. Now, not everybody agrees, and this is not meant to be partisan, by the way. This is meant to let people know that we have a battle on our hands for our future. And there's a lot of money behind maybe not doing anything. But here's the good news. Here's the good news for everybody. We've done studies, and people can't quite comprehend something this big bearing down on us, right? Even Hurricane Sandy, that happened. It's almost like we've forgotten. But we do understand the economic effects, and we do understand the economic opportunities of making change. And when you look at a place like Pittsburgh, if Pittsburgh can go through this transformation and make this change, anybody can. It can be done. Now, we have other problems. Who knows what this number means? Anybody? You only have 3 seconds. This is the number of people that die worldwide on our roads due to vehicular accidents. And we lose about 32,000 in the US. So, we tend to think, hey, this is the cost of doing business. This is the cost of having this freedom as automobilists, as we used to call ourselves back in the day. The thing is, half of that 1.24 million, those are our most vulnerable citizens. Those are our old people, our young people, our disabled people. And we've got to stop thinking culturally that this is acceptable and it's okay. We've also got health issues. I was recently reading that chronic diabetes has been linked to the air quality. And as we re-urbanize, we've got to think about our air quality to save our kids. Now, we know that cities are complex ecosystems, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. And not everything was great back in the day. This is a shanty town in Seattle, and you can see the pollution. And what's interesting is, this is Pike Market, actually, in Seattle. I was just out there a couple weeks ago. A lot of times, these cities that are the old cities that actually keep that old aspect of themselves alive are very valuable cities. So Pittsburgh has an incredibly rich history. Pittsburgh made things. Pittsburgh had an energy industry. Pittsburgh also was on the front of cycling. This is actually 1898, North Pittsburgh. Who says women can't wear dresses and ride a bike in 2015? They did it before. Luna Park. If you look closely, there's a steam engine vehicle to the right. On the left is a horse and buggy, and there's a bicycle right in the middle with one of those things that came back in the 90s. So those little padded things so you could bring the bike up the stairs in your tenement. This is 6th Avenue, and if you look very closely, you probably can't see it from here, but there's a sign that says Digital Carriage Dispatch. I don't know what their definition of digital was in 1900, but they would call a carriage for you. So they had technology here in Pittsburgh. Also, some of the first double-decker trolleys. Trolleys go back to 1850 when they passed legislation at the state level to allow streetcars. And actually, the streetcars, this is a picture from 1984, but they ran until 1999. And these last few PCC cars had over 2 million miles on them per vehicle. You won't find that on a bus or a car or anything else. And the Sky Bus, I was reading about this, pretty amazing. So the other great thing about Pittsburgh, not afraid to try and fail. And that's okay. That's what we want. We need more of that. So what's happening now? And I'm going to have to go a little faster. I'm sorry. We went from hyper-consumption post-war. Everybody wanted their own white picket fence, their own 750 square foot house, their own 2 cars, to collaborative consumption. People want experience. They want to live in a city, particularly younger people. And so we went from a me economy to a we economy. Services like Lyft, services like Uber, services like Airbnb, which you saw earlier. People call these peer-to-peer networks. So we're going from having a set supplier and a customer to everybody being a seller and everybody being a buyer. And I'm here to tell you that if you think, Uber at $45 billion is sort of the new thing, in a few years it could be that, Uber's taking 35% of every ride. It could be that somebody comes along and figures out how to take a quarter and make it a real peer-to-peer network. So the disruptors of today can be the disrupted of tomorrow. And it's not just the private sector that can disrupt. The government is doing amazing things. This is our Divvy bike share system in Chicago, which is now going to, I think, 550 stations and almost 6,000 bikes. Again, people told me, in DC, they'll never wear suits or skirts or heels on a bike. I'm here to tell you that's false. And if you're anything like me, when somebody tells me I can't do something, that's when I absolutely have to prove them wrong. Now, when talking about technology, it's not just the cloud that's changing everything. It's also solar technology is getting better and better and cheaper. Modular design. That allowed us to put these bike sharing systems in at very low cost and very high return. The other thing you're starting to see out there is the repurposing of space. Where'd all the streetcars go? Well, they're gone. But where'd all the space go? Well, we gave it over to cars. So in DC, we took back Pennsylvania Avenue and we made it a cycling street, a complete street for everybody. In Chicago, we knew that if people didn't have a safe way to bike downtown, they weren't going to bike to work. And so we took roads with excess capacity, we repurposed those streets, and we made them into complete streets with two-way cycling infrastructure. We had sensors to sense the cars and the bikes and trigger signals, and we had better throughput, and people actually started to bike. Now, the Make Way for People program shows in Chicago that you don't have to spend a lot of money to make change. We use about a third of our city public space for storing cars. It's ridiculous. That's inefficient. So how about taking some of this space as we re-urbanize and giving it to people? That's my wife, by the way. This is not my wife. This is somebody else's wife. People want green space. It's about creating place. And I think Jeff Speck is here this afternoon and others that'll talk about that. The funny thing is we're not making investments in the things that matter. We're building more parking garages. We're building more healthcare facilities. We don't necessarily need that with all the technology that's coming. What we need is better public transit, better ped and bike infrastructure, better places. And the return is higher. We know the return is higher. We've done the studies, and we know that this is where people want to live. And we know that businesses do better when there's a bike lane in front of it, or a wider sidewalk, or a parklet. Huge increases in retail. So why now? Because this is the most amazing time in transportation history, at least since those pictures I showed you earlier. Now, when I left government a little over a year ago and started giving this presentation, Elon was saying, hey, we're going to have self-driving cars in 3 years. Then he came out last summer and said, well, it's more like 2 years. Then he came out within a year of his original statement and said, actually, we're just going to download it to the cars this June, and you'll be able to drive from Seattle to San Francisco or from Pittsburgh to DC without touching the steering wheel. That's the rate of change. But the thing is, people aren't prepared for it. They think we're going like this, and that's not at all what's happening. And many of you have heard of Moore's Law. It's probably been brought up on the stage today. This slide is from 1982, but it shows you that things are changing fast, and we can either help shape that change, make that change, or we can become victims of that change, particularly in government, by the way. And the change is going to happen so fast that the cities that do have all the re-engineering that we desire and the technology that we desire will be the safe cities, and those are the cities that people will want to live in. And it doesn't have to be 4,800-pound Teslas, by the way. There are really simple solutions, like the Make Way for People program was simple. Very simple pedal electric trikes that are 160 pounds. Jitney buses, that's not new. This is a company that I work with, Bridge. But jitney buses with technology that allows them to be demand aggregated and come to you when you need it, just like the bike share is really nothing new, but it is with all the technology. And it makes it something that everybody can use and share. Or Lyft and Uber now incorporating carpooling, which is nothing new, or hitchhiking is nothing new, but the technology is making it new. So you see a common theme here. There's old meets new, meets a new business model and a new service for people. So how do we get there? We've made horrible planning mistakes. Our DOTs, often embedded in public works departments, have been focused on moving people, throughput, and safety. Not that those aren't important, but I can tell you in Chicago with Rahm Emanuel, we never talked about moving people. We talked about the advantages and benefits of all the features we were bringing to people in terms of their health, in terms of jobs. Whenever Rahm talked about bike lanes, he talked about jobs, and that's what it meant to him. So you also have to break things down to implementable chunks. We have all these great long-range plans, but we put together 24-month plans based on political realities in DC and Chicago, knowing that Adrian Fenty might not win. Now, he was a shoo-in when I started working with him, and then he lost. So you got to get things done in the time frame that you have in business or in government. Fundamentally, we need to redesign around people and stop focusing so much on individual modes. And one of the other things we did in Chicago was actually call out the pedestrian as the indicator species of a healthy city. Because the pedestrian is a transit user, is a cyclist, and is an auto user. But if you don't call them out, the car becomes the de facto mode that everybody plans for. Because we're lazy. And we see so many cars out there, and that's what we do. Now, there are big projects, and some people say, well, you can do that small stuff fast, but the big stuff, like the $100 million reinvention of the Riverwalk, how do you do that fast? Well, I don't have time to tell you, but I am writing a book that will have a chapter on this. But this was a $100 million project that we conceived in May of 2011. I mean, people had thought about it. We actually put together a conceptual design, lined up the funding, did the engineering, and did the public outreach, and went to construction all in about 24 months. And the first 4 blocks are opening this spring. So big projects don't have to take the average 13 to 14 years that they take. You can do them fast, and you can get to construction fast and realize the economic benefits. Also, who remembers when Rick Scott turned back the high-speed rail money? All right. So the Flagler family, who built the original railroad in 1883, and now are mega land barons in Florida, said, wait a second, we're going to do this again. And they sold all their land, and they're rebuilding that East Coast rail line as high-speed rail, and then they're building big TOD around the nodes in Jacksonville and Miami, and they will make more money, I predict, than they had before. Autonomous and vehicle-to-vehicle technology are going to dramatically change the way our cities run, our highways run. Pods, vehicles that just pick you up and take you where you want to go, it's coming. I've been in these cars. They're amazing. They're low-speed vehicles. And some of the technologies are available in the cars that you have today. It just hasn't been knitted together yet, but it will be before the end of this decade. And we'll have safer cities because of it. And the big thing, for those of you that are planners, is if we have parking minimums, not only do you need to get rid of those and go to parking maximums, but soon we aren't going to be building any more parking. And we'll be trying to figure out very quickly how to get rid of all the parking that we've built, because we won't need it. And the public and the private sector are going to have to work together, to the point where in some projects they'll be indistinguishable. And a lot of the services that are going to help our cities become the cities of the future are going to be brought to us by the private sector, with the public sector helping to shape them. And the platforms of the future, the platforms of today that we use in our hands right now, our iPhones and our Google phones, those will be the cars of the future. And it's really just a platform, and you just won't be driving it anymore. But all this talk of high tech, it's really all about us. It's all about families. It's about the environment. And so I put this picture in to remind people that the technology is really just a means to an end. It's not about the technology. It's about creating a quality of life. It's about, taking Pennsylvania from middle of the pack to first, up with DC and Massachusetts and New York as safest in the country, and getting to 0 fatalities. And we have a real opportunity here. We could have a future that looks like this, and I certainly hope not, where pedestrians are relegated are relegated to the background, or we could have a very inclusive, peaceful, fun city of the future. And this is what I hope that we build. Thank you so much.
Nice job. Nice job.
Okay, I'm just going to take a picture, everybody.
Okay. Nice job, Gabe.
Thank you.
First, I want to give kudos to our innovative mayor, who last week just signed an executive order for I think our first complete streets policy. So kudos to our mayor, Mayor Peduto, for doing that. As we continue to talk about complete streets and transportation, not only downtown but in the neighborhoods, and as our city grows, there'll be an increased need and demand for transit-oriented development. What have you seen in other cities, particularly in cities that have similar topographical challenges, like the city of Pittsburgh, and how have they overcome those challenges?
Well, for one thing, I mean, there's over 500 communities now that have complete streets sort of legislated, or, you know, it's there in some form. But there are a lot of places that don't actually do it, right? So they say they're going to do it, but it's got to filter down to the engineers in the transportation department, and it's got to filter down into their practices when they go out and talk to the public about what the project's going to look like, that the conceptual design actually reflects that. So, you know, I think we have a gap in between what people talk about and what they're actually doing. But, you know, one of the things that I think has been very successful in DC, for instance, is providing people as many layers of options as possible. You know, so you provide them, you know, different types of bus service, the circulator bus and the regular bus, and you provide them subway service, and you provide them point-to-point car sharing and regular car sharing on the street in public space, and bike sharing, and you let them choose the best mode for them. So I think the private sector can help a lot with making sure that we have as many options as possible, and the public sector needs to make sure that we take that public right-of-way, that street, and don't just devote all the space to cars.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.